Well, I was actually born in Toronto. I grew up in what was then the town of Leaside, eventually became part of the borough of East York, and is now part of the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. It was a town at the time that I grew up, and it was at the beginning of the beginning, middle, and post World War II. It was a wonderful place to grow up in. Went to the local school, St. Anselm's, and then I, from there, went to Loretto Abbey, a girls' high school in North Toronto. My father sold shoes, shoe salesman, basically corrective shoes, and my mother was what we then called a homemaker. For a bachelor first, and then I went also to the Ontario College of Education to get my high school teaching diploma. And then I studied in the summers while I was teaching. I studied at the Ontario College of Art and also at Banff College. I taught high school in Toronto, and I taught in Guelph, Ontario, and then I taught in Calgary after I had moved, and I did some enhanced studies for a year of fine art at the University of Calgary. And then I began teaching in Calgary and was married, and both our children were born in Calgary, and then we moved here to St. Albert. For my husband's career, Jack was working as the executive director with Alberta Heart and Stroke Foundation, and he was invited to come here to work actually in the Premier's office to assist with the Universiade Games, and so that was the reason we moved initially. Jack and I, through social interaction too, had the opportunity to work with Mrs. Lougheed because she was the honorary patron of the Heart and Stroke campaign. I was, for 2 terms, and they were 3-year terms then, I was on the St. Albert School District School Board. I was a trustee and chairperson for a part of that time in St. Albert. And then in 1991, when I was coming to the conclusion of my time on the school board, I was also on the University of Alberta's Senate. It was very challenging, rather than going back to teaching, which is certainly not a 9-to-5 job, or 9-to-3 or whatever some people disparagingly say it is, but I needed some flexibility to stay on the school board, to be involved as I was. And so I thought, well, I'd like to sell real estate, which would give me a certain degree of flexibility and still give me an opportunity to work and know the people. Actually, I was approached if I would consider it. I thought about it and talked about it with Jack and with our kids, and they said, go for it. It was a challenging one for a couple of reasons. One was because in 1993, Premier Klein had made incredible cuts in the civil service and in others, in health, etc. And I was quite opposed to those cuts. And so it was a challenge for me, and it was those with greater wisdom, such as Myrna Fife and others, who said, well, then that's why you need to be there to... And so I ran on a platform of reinvestment into the people and services and health and education, etc. And the arts and all that had, through those incredible years of great prosperity for the province, and growth. And so that was what I ran on. However, that took a lot of convincing for a lot of people. I don't like negativity, and I'm not by nature negative, so to be in opposition is not easy, but it's not to my taste either. And so I thought, I'm going to do it. I know the community, I think, very well, and so that's why I ran with it. But the election day in 1997 was quite a story. St. Albert is, historically, a French and Métis settlement, and a lot of liberal thought and liberal persuasion politically, but a number also of, we had had previous MLAs who were progressive conservatives. And so it was, and I knocked on a gazillion doors. Interestingly enough, I didn't live in my own constituency. I lived 12 doors away because the boundaries had been drawn dividing part of my neighborhood, for which I was on the very, very edge, into another one. I had opposed those at several forums, but I was never successful in all of the times I've opposed boundary reviews. So I didn't even have a vote for myself, for that matter. Also, I had met people at the doors who were really not happy with the cuts, and they had let me know, and I didn't know, but I had a fantastic team of volunteers, incredible. We're on the phones, we did all of that you do, get out the vote, etc. And we were in the campaign office when the voting polls closed. I won some polls, but I lost some polls, and they were coming in, so there was no predictability about it. When it was declared that all of the polls were in, I had lost, and so we all commiserated. I tried to do the best I could to buoy up the spirits of my volunteers, and they left the campaign office, and we had planned a celebration, which we then realized would become a wake at St. Albert Inn. And so they left, some to go over there, but most of them to go home to their families, etc. So left to turn out the lights, it was my campaign manager, Diane Story, and her sister, actually, Myrna Fife, a previous MLA for St. Albert. And the phone rang, and Diane answered it, and it was the chief returning officer for our area. And she said, we have a whole poll that we did not count in. So when Diane wrote down the results, with such excitement, she threw the phone, just threw it in disbelief. And her sister, Myrna, very wisely said, "Are you sure you heard it correctly?" Meanwhile, Diane's screaming, we won. And I think Patty was there as well, another volunteer. And so we then went over to St. Albert Inn, and many of the volunteers got out of bed, saw it on the news, and came down. We celebrated. It was a roller coaster night, but it required, of course, that we have a recount, and that was quite an education, watching 1,000 votes, one by one, being recounted. And at the end of that, I think I had won by 13 by then. No, by 16, I guess that was the final thing. So that was a relief, and celebrating for that post-election day. Meanwhile, my opponent, Mr. Bracco, Then I was served with a request for, he challenged it and requested a judicial recount, to which we eventually then went to the law courts, and Justice Joanne Veit, I think that's how she pronounces, ruled on it. He had every right to do so, etc. And I saw the variety of ways in which people cast their ballots. Some fill in the circle, some mark X's, some mark check marks. There was one that actually had beside my name and the check mark, "Go Ralph, go." To draw on everything that I had fortunately been mentored to do through school board, working, and in other circumstances, even as a mother, how you deal with the demands and the varying opinions of others. But I've always thought, if you don't like something, let's figure out how we can fix it. And so my challenge to myself was, I want to hear more specifically what are those issues as they have been already articulated, and I want to get to the tables where I can express that, so that fortunately I was elected into government, which I have to say was a very supportive, enabling, if you will, to respond to the needs of the community and the requests, etc. So I always, every week at that time we had 2 local papers, always invited people to come in and tell me what were their issues. And then I held a whole number of forums, actually I'd forgotten how many of them, on the issues that were hot in the legislature, hot topics to be discussed and voted on, for 2 reasons. Because I felt the role of being in the legislature was to communicate to the people of St. Albert what really was the essence of either a bill or a motion or a initiative, but also to take the issues from the people in my community to the legislature to get them addressed as well. Communication is huge. You have to know what is the issue, and then you need not just the facts, because you often get more opinion than fact, and how to message the facts and massage the opinion. Being an MLA is work, and it takes commitment, and I felt I went to every single event or invited groups that I wasn't aware of to come to sessions that we held, so that I could get to know the community even more. I thought I could draw on the experience that I had in teaching, for instance, and in real estate too. It is primarily communication. I can bring that to the table, but also not only listening, but being able to articulate and understand what are the issues that not only are there for you to participate in and identified by others, but the issues that you wanted to bring forward because you have because I could see the need for them, or the need for clarification of them, or the need for adjusting them. And I think politics, unfortunately, does not have the greatest cheerleading squad. That disheartens me. I think it's a very noble role to play. It's representing the people, but it's also bringing your own sense of your own moral compass, number one. So you ask for the trust of the people. You trust them to trust in you. And I felt I had that from the people within St. Albert. We disagreed on a number of issues sometimes, or I found it very, very challenging, for which they let me know they weren't happy. But on the other hand, I felt surely we can find what we want for the common good. I'm very familiar with the famous five, yes. And Irene Parlby and those who did serve, and they faced incredible ones. In fact, the MLA for St. Albert in 1920 voted against giving women even the right to vote. I've always believed that a democracy and those who are elected to represent the people should reflect the people whom they are representing. And I have no idea of the male, female, or gender orientation of the residents of the constituency of St. Albert, but I'm going to hazard a guess it was half and half. The people whom we represent should be reflected in those who do represent them in the legislature. And I mean, there were some very fine women whom I worked with, both in government, those in cabinet, those across the aisle. I'm for inclusive and diversity. I didn't know the exact incredible breadth and strength of the public service and all of that is put into the support systems. I learned a great deal both from my colleagues, but I also learned a great deal from those who were very knowledgeable in the areas of expertise and of government business. It was a good day for me always when I felt I was listened to and when I understood what were the issues that I could bring to the table, what were the challenges, and that we could advance them. I had some some people would call them ugly days, where people screamed, shouted, put me down. In fact, I have in my, I had wonderful assistant at the legislature and an incredible constituency manager, Amy in the constituency office, and Myrna Drew at the legislature. And they kept a record, and I said to them, always keep a record of what people said against me, as well as, I don't need to hear what successes we've had. We just need to deal with what is not pleasing our constituents. Oh, I wouldn't do everything the same way. I did it with the tools and the people and the opportunities that I had then. But now you mellow when you get older. And I would be more, I would be harsher on those who are critical and angry without being knowledgeable. I would do it again. One of the greatest purposes, I feel, as being an MLA is to communicate and to understand and to trust. Both ways, it's a two-way street. And the pandemic has thrown a wrench into every personal interaction, and that, when you add to that, then the increase in social media, which is not face-to-face, which is not getting the full context of a concern, of the concerns of others, etc. Yes, it is a bigger challenge, and that unfortunately doesn't flesh out issues. It doesn't flesh out the human condition under which laws, legislation respecting the common good need to be discussed and put in place. I think we have to, again, encourage and create opportunities for interaction with people. There is also such a division in thought, and it is being fed. I have to say, I sit in, if we want to talk about a spectrum, a political spectrum, I sit in the middle of it. I think whether it is in religion, whether it is in politics, whether it is in whatever, the far outreach of the extreme left, extreme right, or extremism in space even of thought, they are too unbalanced to balance the world and our world, whether it's the cosmic world, whether it's the earth, whether it's whatever. I fortunately felt that we had huge differences of opinion and of take in the legislature. I learned an incredible amount about the whole province. I learned about cormorants, I learned about agriculture, because I had the wonderful opportunity in the community of St. Albert to live close enough that I returned to my community every night. And I also had the opportunity just to work with the local government, that level of government, with one fire department, with one RCMP contingency, with one seniors group, etc. So I was very, very fortunate to do that. I was really fortunate because my husband understood the whole context in which I was working as an MLA. I also I had to make several moves from the constituency office that I inherited from Len before I got to where I wanted, which was mainstream, storefront, open to people. And at that time, I don't know whether the legislature is still organized this way, but we sat till in evenings, except for Thursday night, which allowed those who represented constituencies around the province further away. So Thursday nights was for their travel, etc. But Friday in the constituency, Saturday, Sunday too. But my husband understood it. And while sometimes it was not convenient, it wasn't easy, but it was, and our two kids were quite understanding of it too. They didn't like it a lot, but at times, but they were also, they're terrific, I have to say. I'm very proud of them. To choose your priorities, know the demands of it, of the job, for any job. Know the demands of it. I really appreciate the spectrum of age within the legislature, the spectrum of diversity and backgrounds, etc. But know that you're part of it. I mean, you do work as a broader team. on both sides, all sides, but you also work as a team if you're in partisan politics. You win some, you lose some. You need to have the ability to decide what hill to die on and what not to, and to be able to either justify or explain. And I can remember being in a grade 6 class, and I can still see this young man sitting there in front of me, and he said, when I asked, are there any questions you want to ask me? And he said, yes. He said, why did you decide to become a government person? I thought quickly, and I said to him, what sport do you play? And do you like to play soccer? And he said, yes. And I said, do you like to play soccer or sit in the stands and watch soccer? And he said, I like to play it. And I thought, that's why I wanted to be in government. I'd rather be at the decision-making table than observing it. I lost the election in 2004 for the same reason that when you leave a job, if you've enjoyed the job, and I don't mean it's just a job, it was a commitment. I've always loved what I did, and I've always appreciated the people whom I worked with. And so that was difficult. It's a loss, you grieve it, etc. And I grieved it particularly for my 2 assistants, for Myrna here at the legislature and for Amy in the constituency office, because they really served the community extremely well, and for all of my volunteers, etc. You will remember Sign Chatty, who was a Liberal MLA. He approached me and said, I'm on the board of the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation, and we are looking for an executive director. Would you consider? And thanks to Sign for inviting me to compete in the competition. And I found a world of incredible people in the healthcare system. Unbelievable. It's one of Alberta's, Edmonton's, the healthcare system's best kept secret. What they do to rehabilitate the patients who are there, who are on a long journey. It's not like it's not your hospital, your crises hospital, etc. It is a long journey and an incredible. So I was there. I also had sat on it's no longer in existence, but the Alberta Cancer Board. I currently sit on a federal board called the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer, which is a pan-Canadian organization, which basically, people don't know about this, but you know, cancer care, and cancer is such a big issue and concern. And what we do is we create partnerships. I'm on the board, I shouldn't say I, the administration and the staff do, for research or clinical care that is really working for the patient-centered, for the patient. If it's working here and it's working there, they create the partnerships so that across Canada, the provinces and territories, people who are in cancer care, involved in it, then can learn from and assimilate into their practice cancer care, cancer research, cancer. So it's creating partnerships. Just to tell you Jack's work, both with human rights, but he worked with Gertrude Singh Bhatia, a Sikh, and Professor Jerry Gall, a Jew, Jack, a Christian, and I say that because they were the ones who organized in 1998 the International Conference for Human Rights for its 50th anniversary, when it was instituted at the UN in 1945 at the end of World War II. And that's when Desmond Tutu, Mary Robinson, all of those figures came to Edmonton and spoke. Again, I have to say it crossed all political stripes and ethnicity and religions, etc. I just think collaboration is the answer instead of division. The one thing I hope Albertans would know is that we are part of a country. We are residents of Alberta, we are citizens of Canada. And while we are unique, I've lived in a couple of provinces, we are part of an incredible country, and we need to work together. And that's what I see the legislature's role in doing. It is in looking after the affairs and the common good and putting in place legislation that is for the benefit of all in the province, but we also do it within the context of a very broad, diverse community that is growing in all of its aspects, in its economy, etc. And democracy is so important. Not to say, I'm here to put my hands up because we want this, but I'm here to put my voice forward because we want to all benefit everybody. The rich, the poor, the marginalized, the success, all of us together.